Operating in the greater Chicago area is a group of locomotives that are not only unique to the Midwest, but also represent the legacy of one of America's oldest railroads. Despite the fact that it ceased to exist over 20 years ago, artifacts of the Illinois Central Railroad, not only limited to these locomotives, can be seen all over Chicago to this day. Beginning operations out of Cairo, Illinois in 1851, the Illinois Central was one of America's first railroads and at one point one of its largest. Operating a sprawling system across its namesake state as early as 1856, the Illinois Central was an integral force in Chicago's 1850s railroad boom, cementing Chicago as the rail capital of the United States. Beginning in the 1880s, the Illinois Central began service between Chicago and New Orleans, later creating the iconic City of New Orleans passenger train, which is still operated by Amtrak to this day. While nowadays the Illinois Central is but a memory to many, its roots are still deeply ingrained in today's Chicagoland modern railroads. Operating out of Millennium Station, the Metra Electric District is a pretty unique commuter rail. Instead of using diesel power as the rest of Metra does, the Electric District, as one would guess, uses electric trains, the likes of which are seldom seen in the United States. The Electric District is the westernmost electrified commuter rail in the United States, and while that's a lot of qualifiers, nonetheless it's important. Anyways, what does this have to do with the Illinois Central? Well, in 1926, the Illinois Central electrified its line between downtown Chicago and the far south side, making the creatively named Illinois Central Electric. This new commuter rail quickly became the railroad's busiest passenger line, peaking at a yearly ridership of 47 million passengers in 1946. Using a fleet of electric multiple unit trains, the Electric was unlike any other commuter train at the time, operating less like an American passenger train and more like an electrified European train. Unfortunately, while the Electric was Chicago's best passenger line in the 1940s, after World War II, ridership would enter a state of decline as automobiles became more prevalent in American homes. While ridership would slowly decline beginning after the war, the Electric would still continue to be profitable until all of a sudden it wasn't. By the 1970s, American passenger rail was in a state of financial ruin, with car ownership reaching an all-time high and rail ridership reaching an all-time low. At this time, railroads countrywide were rapidly cutting passenger service and focusing on more profitable freight operations, in some cases removing passenger trains altogether. While the federally funded Amtrak was created in 1971 to operate most intercity rail in America, it didn't save any commuter rails, putting the IC Electric in jeopardy of being decommissioned as a whole. Luckily though, in 1976, the state-funded Regional Transportation Authority, or RTA, was created to save passenger rail in the greater Chicago area, with the state government taking passenger operations off private railroads' hands. To this day, the RTA, otherwise known as Metra, operates what is now known as the Electric District, and while it's known to be a pretty solid commuter rail, it's not nearly as profitable, nor is its ridership as high as it was almost a century ago. Amidst the Illinois Central's financial troubles, they made an attempt to ease tensions with an expansion in the South. In 1972, the Illinois Central acquired the Gulf, Mobile, and Ohio Railroad, building the IC up to 8,000 total miles of trackage throughout the Midwest. After rebranding to the Illinois Central Gulf Railroad, freight profits still continued to dwindle, continuing the railroad's financial strain throughout the 80s. In 1988, the Illinois Central made one final desperate move to save themselves from bankruptcy, selling off many redundant ex-GM&O lines, but even this wasn't enough to save them, as the Illinois Central's time came in 1998, when after over a century and a half of service, the Illinois Central closed its doors, being taken over by the Canadian National Railway. And that's where the IC stands today. It's being operated by Canadian National in the Midwest and Gulf Coast, and once again, while many artifacts of the Illinois Central can be observed across this part of CN's system, it seems more Canadian than anything else. Still, this doesn't mean that the IC has completely ceased to exist. A handful of locomotives acquired by CN in the merger still retain their original Illinois Central paint. Of these, no better example prevails than the ex-IC SD70s, otherwise known as the Death Stars. Ordered in the late 1990s, the SD70s were some of the last locomotives ordered by IC. In fact, the last of these locomotives were delivered after CN had taken over operations. Despite that, well over half of these standard cab SD70s still wear black Illinois Central paint, operating on local freight trains in the greater Chicago area. These SD70s make up the backbone of Chicago's power base. Here we are at the 18th Street Bridge, overlooking Ping Tom Memorial Park in Chicago's Chinatown, and here we see CN Local L536 a daily mixed freight operating between Chicago's Glen Yard and Gary's Kirk Yard. This train is just getting going after waiting on a signal, and now that it's made its way into downtown Chicago, it'll turn around at McCormick Place, joining the previously mentioned Metro Electric District, and then heading south to Homewood. After working the yard there, L536 will turn east at Harvey Junction, crossing into Indiana, and finally turning north towards Gary at Griffith Junction. After a long day of navigating Chicago's many complicated junctions, this local will turn back as L537, transferring cars between these two large classification yards. Despite the fact that they're formerly owned by the Canadian National Railway, these ex-Illinois Central SD70s still keep their old IC reporting marks, essentially preserving them as they were 20 years ago when the IC still operated them. While one would expect such old locomotives to be knocking on the end of their useful service lives, this doesn't seem to be the case here in Chicago, as the Death Stars continue to prove extremely reliable for CN. Unfortunately though, with current emissions standards and modern computer systems, these engines certainly aren't getting any younger. Over the years, however, there have been plenty of rumors stating that the IC SD70s will be rebuilt and reclassified as SD70 ACCs, but as of right now, no official plan has been revealed by CN. Regardless, they still have plenty time left, serving as some truly amazing artifacts of the Illinois Central, one of Chicago's first railroads.